Hello, good noon. I'm from Bangladesh.
Welcome to our event.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Okay.
It's evening there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, excuse me.
Hi. Can our colleagues confirm that all the attendants have joined our webinar?
Hello, good afternoon. It's a pleasure meeting with you. My name is Umar Goni Ahmed from Nigeria.
Nigeria.
Yeah, sure.
Good
Hello,
to see you,
Ambassador, Your
Mr.
Excellency,
Umar.
MD.
Good to see you back. Good to see you back. So happy.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much, MD. MD, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ambassador Bilal. Dilip here.
Oh, Mr. Dilip. Thank you, Mr. Dilip.
And also, good afternoon to Howard.
Hello, Dilip.
How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Dilip.
Thank you, Mr.
Good
Dilip.
to see you again.
Yes, I'm very curious about what you're going to say.
And we are excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Ambassador Bilal and team.
Good afternoon, Excellency. Good afternoon, Excellency Halima from Kenya, our ambassador of Kenya. Thank you, Excellency.
I'm here.
So good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Thank you. Thank you. I can see a lot of our excellencies.
Good afternoon. This is Fortuna from Embassy of Ethiopia, from Brussels.
From Brussels. Thank you, Excellency. Thank you. We are so happy to have you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ambassador Bilal. This is Milad Ati of Syria, Ambassador of Syria.
Okay, Excellency Milad. Thank you.
Thanks for joining you and the other colleagues.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Yes,
Wish you a successful meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, Ambassador Bilal. Hector Constant from Venezuela.
Excellency, I think in so many ways that you are the go-between for me and Mr. Howard.
I am very, very happy to see Dr. Nichols also collaborating closely with the fund. Very happy. And I hope that we could reinforce that cooperation.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it.
Indeed.
ኦኬ ማለት አለብህ ኦኬ ፎርዋርድ ላድርግልህ እኔ ገባሁ እኮ
Chris, I think we can go
I
ahead.
think we can start.
Please. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, I am Javier Yoka from the Embassy of Ecuador. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you, my dear colleague. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. You're muted. You're muted, please.
One technical difficulty, we solved it. So good morning or good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of the Common Fund for Commodities, I would like to thank you for being here today and joining this CFC event. Here in the Common Fund for Commodities, we strongly believe that in a world characterized by an unprecedented level of economic development, technological means and financial resources, it is not right that millions of people are living in extreme poverty. The ongoing global turmoil, commodity scarcity, and rising inflation are likely to have pushed even more people into extreme poverty. The International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, commemorated on October 17th each year, originated in 1987 when a massive gathering in Paris proclaimed poverty as a violation of human rights. This event emphasized the need for collective action to ensure these rights are respected. Since then, people of diverse backgrounds have united annually to express solidarity with those living in poverty. The theme for this year's webinar is Ending Social and Institutional Maltreatment, Acting Together for Just, Peaceful and Inclusive Societies. It is with much pleasure that we welcome Professor Dr. Howard Nicholas, Professor Emeritus of the International Institute of Social Studies, as our keynote speaker. The discussion today will help us reflect on how our work at the grassroots of commodity value chains could contribute more to poverty eradication. Without further ado, and before we hear our speakers, we would like to play a short introductory video prepared for our colleagues here in the CFC.
Across the globe, smallholder farmers form the backbone of the agricultural sector. They nurture the land, sow the seeds, and harvest the crops that feed the world. Yet these farmers face an unfair reality. What they receive at the farm gate is often just a fraction of what their labor is truly worth. A stark disparity between farm gate prices and the final retail price reveals a broken system. The hard-earned fruits of their labor are often undervalued, leaving millions of farmers trapped in cycles of poverty. The Common Fund for Commodities is committed to changing this narrative. By investing in sustainable agricultural practices, improving market access, and supporting value-added processes, we're working to empower farmers and close the gap in the value chain. Demand for our services is stronger than ever. To meet this overwhelming demand, we are mobilizing new resources. Our Agricultural Commodity Transformation Fund connects seed financing from the CFC with private sector impact investment and aims to increase vital support we can provide. Our investments are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals and help target poverty eradication, food security, gender equality, and sustainable economic growth. We are humanizing the value chain, ensuring that the benefits flow back to those who deserve them most. Together, we can reduce inequality, empower farmers, and build a future where no one is left behind. Poverty ends when opportunity begins. Let's build those opportunities together. Join us in transforming the agricultural value chain. Together, we can eradicate poverty, empower farmers, and create lasting change. Invest in a sustainable future. Invest with CFC. Across the globe.
Sincere thank you to the CFC colleagues that prepared this really moving video. As we move forward, I'm honored now to introduce our Managing Director, His Excellency Ambassador Sheikh Mohammed Belal. At the CFC, we are continuously searching for effective ways to improve the lives of smallholder farmers. This includes supporting digital innovation that enables them to earn more from the commodities they grow and the services they provide. Digitalization of the commodity value chains, we believe, has a huge potential to increase their income and help farmers overcome barriers to prosperity. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I hope all you can hear me well. Excellencies, and I see a good many of you, including our Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, our Chairperson of the Executive Board, all our colleagues and members of my team in the CFC. Ladies and gentlemen, as we commemorate International Poverty Day 2024, I stand before you with a deep sense of urgency, conviction, and yes, emotion as well, because poverty is not just a number, it is a violation of human dignity. Today, as we welcome you to this webinar, we would also urge you to reflect on the injustices that continue to exist in our world. 712 million people still live in extreme poverty, approximately double the current population of the United States. Of these, nearly 90% of children in extreme poverty reside in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, representing a staggering 330 million vulnerable lives. According to the United Nations High-Level Panel on Women's Economic Empowerment, women's unpaid labor adds up to 10 trillion per year. Yes, you heard it right, 10 trillion per year, which is 13% of the global GDP. According to the Food and Agricultural Organization, women own less than 20% of agricultural land, yet make up to 60% of the agricultural workforce in parts of Africa and Asia. At the heart of these issues lies our global dependence on commodities. Over 800 million people at the lowest income levels depend on commodities and related jobs for survival. Take this sobering fact. The average commodity-dependent country would need a staggering 190 years to halve its reliance on commodities compared to other nations. 1/3 of the world's poorest billion people live in resource-rich countries, yet they remain poor. While the wealth generated from these resources rarely flows back to those who need it the most. In Africa alone, over 75% of least developed countries rely on commodities for more than half of their export earnings. Farmers, who are among the most impacted, earn on average only 35% of what people in other sectors make. This stark income disparity highlights the systemic inequality embedded within our global economic structures. Excellencies, my dear colleagues, the world is suffering from a huge disparity between the farm gate and final price. War needs not to go anywhere beyond what happened in the world of cocoa in April 2024, only a few months back, when the price of cocoa hit the highest ever price of about 11,000 US dollar per metric ton. The farmers in Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire can expect only in the range of $2.50 per kilo of cocoa beans, not $11 US dollar per kilo they are selling at New York Stock Exchange. Since our smallholders are happy even with these $2.50 US cents, people who did not shed an iota of sweat to produce this cocoa are continuing to earn in the range of 11 US dollar or more per kilo. If you walk back along the value chain, smallholders will be lucky if they ever get a reasonable return on their investment in coffee or cocoa or for any other commodities you can think of. This is a huge blind spot in the marketplace that we need to fix. Here in the Common Fund, we are trying to make a humble proposition, which we call humanizing the value chains. The concept of humanizing value chains is based on the theory of benefiting smallholders and other low-wage workers in ways where money will go straight to working people using technologies like blockchains, AI, and other emerging technologies. All guardrails will be provided to make sure that money is going to the person for whom it is intended. At this time, we urge you, as a conscious consumer, to encourage the brand of coffee you drink, chocolate you eat, or nice piece of garment you wear. Please urge them to join our pilot so that we can lay out a plan more like digital tipping for our farmers and workers, and thereby convert the cents and pennies into millions and billions through a process which you can say win-win for all. Look at this table to know how cents and pennies could be turned into millions and billions through the generosity of you as a conscious consumer. Every day, we drink 3 billion cups of coffee, and those coffee are being produced by 25 million farmers. If each consumer gives only 1 cent more, at the end of the day, our smallholders will get 30 million more. And if you distribute this 30 million to 25 million smallholders, each one will get $1.20 at the end of the day. And this $1.20 with their pre-existing income, they are readily above the poverty line. And at the end of the day, they get 36, at the end of the year, 432. But I can tell you, the young generation of conscious consumers, our children, they will give even much more than 1 penny. They can give more than 5 pennies. If they give 5 pennies, at the end of the day, it is 1.5 billion. And if you distribute it to 25 million farmers, everyone gets $6. And if you get $6, poverty could become a history. So, ladies and gentlemen, in order to implement innovative initiatives like this humanizing value chain, we need fund. We also need more fund to meet the overwhelming demand that we have here in the CFC. Over the past 3 years alone, the CFC has received an extraordinary 873 project proposals, requesting $770 million in investment. These proposals represent real opportunities for poverty reduction, agricultural transformation, and economic empowerment. Yet, due to painful squeeze of resources, the CFC has only been able to support 45 projects, providing just 44.2 million, which is only 6% of the total funding requested. We therefore request you to address this overwhelming demand and be a part of the new fund, the Agricultural Commodity Transformation Fund, ACT Fund, that we designed for you. And we are expecting to get $100 million with 10 million dedicated funding for technical assistance facility. We would urge you to encourage your country, the businesses that you know, to be part of this newly formed Impact Fund, Agricultural Commodity Transformation Fund, to do more together. Common Fund as an UN-affiliated entity, we are here only for impact, not for profit. So when you invest in us, you are investing for impact, for alleviation of poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world where more people have access to a mobile phone than a toilet. A world where poverty remains unaddressed for far too many. This is not just an economic imbalance, it is a moral outrage, one that we must collectively confront. If we accept this truth, then we must also accept that poverty, in its persistent and destructive form, is not merely a consequence of economic systems gone wrong. It is an affront to our civilized world. As Nelson Mandela once said, I quote, "Like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings," unquote. The action that we are asking of you now is your moral consistency as a conscious consumer to humanize the value chain. I thank you. Excellencies, it is also my time for you to introduce you my keynote speaker. But before I introduce him, I would also like you to be introduced with one of our founding fathers. His name is Dr. Dasanayaka Gamana Korea from Sri Lanka. You can call him one of the founding parents of CFC. It was because of his authentic and foresighted leadership, the reality of the Common Fund and integrated program of commodities are made possible. Rest in peace, Father. Now it is finally my time and utmost privilege and honor to introduce you to another Sri Lankan, Professor Howard Nicholas, Professor Emeritus of the International Institute of Social Studies, ISS, The Hague, who is joining us all the way from Vietnam. He has graciously adjusted to the time difference and probably likely sacrificed some of his sleep to be here with us today. Dr. Howard Nicholas is an economist with extensive teaching experience in the area of business economics and financial markets. Having taught these subjects for 40 years at the Institute of Social Studies, part of the Erasmus University of Rotterdam, where he was awarded Best Teacher Award every year except one. Since the award was first given in 2000 till his retirement in 2020. In addition to teaching for the ISS, Dr. Nicholas has taught at business schools in a number of countries, including China, Vietnam, and Sri Lanka. He is regularly invited to give lectures on the global economy and is known by those who have attended his lectures for his early warnings on Asian crisis in 97, the global crisis in 2001 and 2008, and the little-known crisis of the Chinese economy in 2015, and the global crisis of 2020. Dr. Nicholas has also given numerous keynote addresses, including most recently at the African Union 2022 in Cairo and 2024 in the Bahamas. Prior to setting up ETIS, Dr. Nicholas helped establish the Institute of Policy Studies for the government of Sri Lanka in 1989 and an economic advisory company, eConsult, in 1990. In the early 2000s, he also helped set up Lime Phu Schools of Business and Governance in Suriname. Aside from his teaching experience, Dr. Nicholas has published numerous articles in reputed international journals and 2 books on the theory of price with Springer Macmillan. He is currently working on 2 further books as sequels to his 2023 books on prices, which are expected to appear in 2025 and 2026, respectively. Professor Nicholas, thank you for your dedication and commitment. We truly honor to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Bello. I hope you can hear me well.
We can hear
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, CFC and Your Excellencies. It's a pleasure. It's not too late here in Vietnam, but it wouldn't matter to me. I think CFC is such an important organization that we have to do whatever we can in support of this organization, which in turn is supporting the Global South. Now, I usually, when I make presentations like this, I get straight into it, but one word is very important to me is to remember my fellow countryman, the great Dr. Galmani Correa, and his unceasing quest for developing the Global South. I had the honor of him being the first chairman of the think tank that I set up for the Sri Lankan government, the Institute of Policy Studies. And why that was a particular honor is a lot of the things that I've been lecturing on in the last, 20 years and more comes straight from the horse's mouth, from Dr. Correa and his experiences, which are just too numerous to even document. It's a pity somebody doesn't sit down one day and document it, but I guess your institution and UNCTAD could do a very good job there. Okay. What I want to do is make 3 points. Usually I get lost in ramblings, but I want to make 3 important points, and they relate to my perception of the attitude of the northern group of countries, the West, to the CFC. It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Ambassador, that the West has basically lost interest in the CFC. The first point I want to make there is I think it's actually a serious mistake, not for the Global South, but actually for the Global North. That's the first point I want to make. Second point is I actually think this attitude could well end up being a blessing in disguise. And the third point, and that actually follows directly from the second point and the first point, is I believe that one of the beneficiaries of what is happening now could well be the BRICS. And it's a suggestion I want to make at the very end on the basis of a couple of things that I'm going to say. Now, what I want to do, hoping that it works, is share a PowerPoint slide with you all. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Great, great. Okay, so the title is Wither the CFC, meaning what's going to happen to it. And just to repeat something that's I see on your site and have read numerous places, when the CFC was set up, actually it was considered to be a win-win for both the global north and the global south. And it was a win-win because it was going to help stabilize prices and output levels of primary commodities. Primary commodities being extremely important as inputs for the northern countries, the manufacturers, and extremely important for the global south because this is the basis for the incomes and the growth of these countries. So in that sense, it was considered to be a win-win. And for the global north, it was a way of keeping developing countries continuing to produce primary commodities without looking to alternatives. You know, it's like Social Security. Basically, Social Security is given to keep unemployed people from revolting against the system. So this is like an international or global social security system where this money is provided to the developing world to stabilize prices in the interests of both the North and the South. But something happened. Basically, in the last couple of decades, with the rise of neoliberal thinking, there came a belief that we don't need the CFC. That if we just allow markets to work, we'll get stable prices and output levels which meet demand. And the two types of markets we refer to as spot markets for primary commodities, for nickel, for zinc, for grain, for cocoa, for coffee, etc. And more important than even the spot markets, futures markets. It was genuinely believed that we don't need the CFC. The markets will actually do what the CFC was supposed to do. But my son has done some research following up on lots and lots of articles. In fact, the irony is some of the major institutions of the North have found exactly what my son is now showing in this chart. He's showing you the price volatility of primary commodities, and this is a World Bank primary commodity index, together with manufactured goods volatility. And actually, it doesn't make any difference what indicator you take. He's taken many, and he comes with the same result. So you can see the blue, how volatile the prices are. In other words, the markets actually didn't reduce volatility at all. If anything, the extent of the volatility has gotten worse, precisely because less and less money has been provided for stabilizing primary commodity prices. So all these arguments turned out to be fallacious. Now, I won't go into the technical side of what he presented, but basically the right hand summarizes the extent of the volatility. But the crucial thing is to see this. So we know that the markets have failed. The thing is, I have long I've long argued, I think it's getting too late in the night for me to be totally coherent. You're lucky I don't speak in another language at the moment. I have long argued that economic growth and balance of payments are fundamentally damaged by concentrating on primary commodity production. My son is just finishing a PhD on the topic of industrialization. And one of the charts that he came up with is this chart, which relates per capita income in current US dollars, so this axis, the vertical axis, to the share of a country's exports accounted for by raw materials. You can see this is 0 share, this is 25%, there is 50%, going to almost 100% of all exports accounted for by raw materials and primary commodity. And we can see here is the cluster of all the poor developing countries, the African countries, the Latin American countries, the South Asian countries. It's no coincidence that they are all primary commodity producers. As you shift towards manufacturers, you can see then your growth rates start. And the blue, the dots and the squares and the triangles, these are developed Europe, developing Asia, and the developed world excluding Asia. So developed Europe also includes now the Eastern Europeans. Developed Asia, Japan, Korea, Singapore. And now we have China joining those ranks. So one of the stories to come out of this is without some shift towards manufacturing, the countries are destined to remain here. This is why it's such an irony, because the CFC was designed in a way to keep countries here, to give them a reasonable living standard and keep them there. But the advanced countries, I don't know whether it's for greed or stupidity, but it seems to be some combination of both of those, did not want to continue supporting the CFC. In my view, this is shooting oneself in the foot because they're going to pay heavily for it. The second thing I've argued, and this should be convincing enough for everybody, is if you look at, and here we're looking at 162 countries here. We split them between non-industrializing countries, in other words, those raw material and primary good producers, and the industrializing countries. Now, this is the current account balance, the most important balance as a percentage of GDP. You can see the industrializers always have positive balances, always. The raw material basic goods producers always have negative current account balances. When you have negative current account balances, sooner or later, you're going to borrow too much. And when you borrow too much, you're going to get into debt. So any shock in the global economy, immediately you're going to be in trouble, especially when that shock comes with higher interest rates, because you've borrowed to keep surviving, since you cannot earn enough of foreign exchange to meet all your import obligations. You're eventually going to have bad debts. And with COVID, we've seen 82 countries go to the IMF. All of them are here, all of them. There's not one country that belongs to this group. So it's the second reason that I've always had why developing countries have to move out of primary commodity production. And that takes me to Vietnam. You see, Vietnam has been trying for a very long time to get away from producing just things like coffee and primary commodities. But it was not able to do that because the United States put an embargo effectively on Vietnam. It used non-tariff barriers to block all of Vietnam's attempts to develop a manufacturing-based export economy. Somewhere around 2010, 2012, a deal was struck between the Vietnamese government and the US government. And it had to do with the US and the West wanting to move away from China. And what they said to Vietnam is, okay, we are now going to send our manufacturers to your country, our producers to your country, and help you to industrialize. Because these are the manufacturers that used to manufacture in China have now come to Vietnam. Can you see the difference it makes? The difference it makes to Vietnam. It used to be a country that was permanently going back to the IMF, permanently having to borrow to survive, because it was a primary commodity producer. Unknown to most people, Vietnam is the second largest coffee producer in the world. I think the CFC people know this. But most other people never knew this. They don't know how important it used to be. But now no longer. It's still there. There's a lot of coffee production there, but the difference was made by Vietnam shifting into manufacturing production. From this point on, they were able to actually ride through COVID without having the usual fallback into foreign debt. Unlike my own country, Sri Lanka, where we collapsed basically under the pressures of COVID and the debt we had accumulated. What does this mean? What am I showing everyone? What this means is, and I'm not the only one, when I've attended the two major conferences of the African Union, the reason they asked me to come was because they're committing themselves to industrialization. And my argument is that they will do that while still producing primary commodities. However, there's going to be a relative shortage of primary commodities. So here is my forecast for the next 20 years, is I think there will be a significant rise in the prices of primary commodity prices. And that's going to put upward pressure on inflation, global inflation, and it's also going to put upward pressure on global interest rates. So it's a big call, if you like. This has intrigued a lot of my students, and I have to give a special seminar now to a lot of my business students, because for them this is gold dust. You know, this second line is absolute gold dust for them. Now, when I look at Africa and I look at Latin America, why I say don't give up production of primary commodities, because once you get into manufacturing with your own inputs, and remember, it's not each country providing all the inputs, but rather it's the whole continent of Africa using their free trade agreement to provide inputs for all the countries at subsidized rates. You know, and that means that African countries will have a huge competitive advantage. And what my advice is, why don't you set up an independent CFC? So we have this UN CFC, which the northern countries stupidly, in my view, incredibly stupid. I can't imagine who their advisors are, who their supposed intellectuals are, because this is one of the most catastrophic things I think they have done in a very long time. And, there are pretty large number of catastrophic things the northern countries are doing at the moment and have done, but I think you will see that this is probably one of the biggest of all. And that is because I think there is a possibility to negotiate with the BRICS. And I think the BRICS have a vested interest, especially because they have a lot of primary commodity producers in their ranks. And by the ranks, I mean the extended BRICS, not just the main BRICS, but also the extended BRICS. I think they would look very favorably on trying to stabilize primary commodity prices. In any case, for any successful industrialization, you need stable and remunerative primary commodity production. I would go one step further and congratulate you on identifying the importance of agricultural commodities, especially food production, because no country actually ever succeeded without plentiful supplies of cheap food. This is absolutely vital. So it's not to say, oh, let's shift to to manufacturing now, away from primary commodities. No. I think this development must go hand in hand. And I think the CFC has a very important role there, perhaps not in its present form. It needs to mutate. I think a discussion needs to take place with a lot of entities in the global south. But the BRICS is one that also comes to mind, but I have mentioned it when I've made presentations at the African Union. I think this is something they have to look at very seriously and put a lot of money behind it. As you have said, Ambassador Belal, in our private conversations, it's absurd to have such a meager sum supporting this, not because we feel sorry for the poor. That is there. That has to be there. The humanist element has to be there, but it makes economic sense. It makes economic sense. And this is an absolute must. Those charts are very important. People have to study those charts and understand that we have gone nowhere and it's getting worse, because the more volatile these prices, the more damage that is done to the primary commodity producing countries, the worse it's going to be for the industrializers. Thank you very much, CFC, for giving me this chance to make a presentation.
Thank you
I
very
hope
much.
the message is gone.
Thank you very much, Professor Nikolaos, for
Pleasure.
this thought-provocative journey from the roots of the Common Fund for Commodities to the complexities of modern commodity markets to actual solutions for the future. Thank you very much for your contribution. I would like now to invite my colleague, Mr. Peter Nilsson, to share some experience on one of CFC's projects that makes a real contribution to addressing poverty and food security. Peter has recently returned from Geneva, where he was a panelist at the UNCTAD multi-year expert meeting on commodities and development. And Peter, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chris. This is going to be a tough act to follow, so I will not try so, but I will instead revert to the topic of today with a bit of an exploration on how the CFC is contributing towards addressing the specific theme of this year's Day for the Eradication of Poverty. Specifically, I'll be delving into a couple of our portfolio companies, among which I've recently visited one in Uganda and a bit earlier this year also in Sierra Leone, to see how various companies within our portfolios are acting based on a profit-making mandate still, but acting to instill more justice, more peace, and more inclusion into global agricultural value chains. So, without further ado, I will ask for the first slide, which I'll make use of to introduce in a few sentences the work of Enimiro. I'll be jumping pretty much straight to the point. I'll be quite practical in this. We'll delve a bit from the high-flying perspective that we were just introduced to, and nest ourselves, embed ourselves in the soil of Eastern Uganda, where Enimiro can be said to be acting for justice, one of the first of the three themes of this year's Day for the Eradication of Poverty. And they can be said to be acting for justice through their promotion of more equitable value chains, where a greater part of the value is actually accredited and accrues to the smallholders that go about the actual production of the vanilla in the field. So Enimiro Products Uganda Limited, they're based out of Eastern Uganda, close to a town called Jinja. It's a bit more than 2 hours outside of Kampala. They work today with about 4,000 registered smallholders, not only in Eastern Uganda, but across the East and the West. And they work with them to improve on the vanilla production of these smallholders, as well as supporting their livelihoods in a number of other ways. They provide a suite of services to these farmers. They provide them access to markets, which is what we were just discussing, the markets that we need to act more fairly in favor of the smallholders, for them to achieve improved livelihoods and a bigger slice of the pie. They also provide them access to financial inclusion by providing them access to bank accounts, making digital payments to them to avoid overly relying on physical payments with the risks that they pose. They provide them access to extension services in the form of training, not only in vanilla growing, but also in growing a suite of other products that these farmers can rely on for their livelihoods, to become less reliant on global markets and the volatility that they bring. And then they provide them access to certification premiums for organic, for fair trade, and for a number of other social and environmental certification standards that they follow. Now, we have been providing Enimiro with access to trade finance. So we've been financing their exports on the back of contracts that they enter into with global buyers. Now, why, though, am I highlighting Enimiro as a case of acting for justice on this day? I'm doing so much in the spirit, really, of the previous slide highlighted or brought forward by the professor, showing the volatility in global commodity prices. So some of you will know that in late 2023, or during the course of 2023, vanilla prices, global vanilla prices collapsed. It's not the first time that this has happened, and we all knew that it would happen again. It was merely a matter of time. But during 2023, I believe in only a few months, global prices, which again are different from smallholder prices, but global prices collapsed by a margin of 90%. Now, this meant that in a country where the living income price of vanilla had been estimated to be around $10 per kilo for green vanilla at the farm gate, dropped below $1 per kilo at the farm gate on the market. Now, in Emiro, though, they had to act and act within the confines of what's possible within global markets to evade bankruptcy, but they did instill a vanilla price floor guarantee that was about 7% of market rates at the time. They were trading vanilla at a minimum of $6 per kilo as opposed to less than $1 per kilo through the collapse in the prices. Prices are now coming up again, but vanilla at this point in time, probably also out of sound business acumen, invested in preserving the livelihoods of the smallholders on which they themselves relied for the supply of vanilla to keep the vanilla vines in the ground and to keep the smallholder happy. So they acted in the interest of justice and they preserved their business model, and we're happy to go on supporting them through access to reasonably priced credit, as this is the type of business practices that we are looking to support in our endeavor to also act for justice within global value chains. Now, for the next slide, acting for peace. Thank you. And for this one, we're going to Sierra Leone, another country that I recently visited earlier this year to look at the work on one of our other investee companies. So Goldtree, Sierra Leone, it's located in the east of the country, close to Guinea. It's an exporter of certified organic and RSPO deforestation-free palm oil, which they source from their own plantation and about 10,000 registered smallholders. Again, these smallholders benefit from an organic and RSPO premium that provides them access to the premium markets among European buyers. Goldtree provide their smallholder suppliers with, again, this market access, extension services in the form of training, and crucially also a large number of jobs, not only in their 2,000 hectare nucleus plantation, but also in their own processing facilities, where they convert the palm oil fruit and the palm oil kernels into crude palm oil and palm kernel oil for export to the premium markets and for a decent amount of local sales also. Now, we're supporting their work, again, with a trade finance facility of about $1 million. And why am I highlighting, in this case, the work of Goldtree? It's because Goldtree in 2007 decided to set up the mill which they're now working from. This was a mill that had been abandoned following or during the 11-year civil war in Sierra Leone. And the refurbishment of that abandoned oil mill provided some of the first new formal jobs in the aftermath of the Civil War. And you need to be no expert, and neither am I on the topic, but providing these livelihoods and providing opportunities to people in post-conflict areas and in areas liable to conflict is a key measure necessary to avoid the eruption of new disturbances. So I'm highlighting this as a case in point of the CFC supporting companies that, as part of their mandate, are indeed acting for peace. Now, to the final slide, before I will leave any questions, the CFC acting for inclusion. I'm presenting here the case of Conservación de la Selva Norte, a project in northern Peru, in the Andes and the Amazon areas, where a project developer is setting up a project to conserve about 200,000 hectares of forest. It's doing so by working with a set of rural communities to create new income opportunities that can serve to limit deforestation by limiting their reliance on deforestation-prone practices to support their own livelihoods in these communities. So they are providing the communities with resources in the forms of affordable credit to initiate alternative livelihoods. You see on the right coffee cherries So coffee growing is one example, ecotourism is another example, beekeeping is another example of these alternative livelihoods that provide alternatives to deforestation. Now, what is groundbreaking about this specific project is that it's a project that is ultimately owned by the communities, and the communities are the ones who stand to eventually benefit from the sale of carbon credits that are generated as part of this project. And say what you will about carbon credits, but in this case, it's an opportunity for communities to earn a living from the activities that they are carrying out to benefit the rest of the world by preserving the world's forest. The CFC will eventually receive free payment for our close to $300,000 contribution to this. We will receive the repayment from the sale of the carbon credits, which serve also as the primary security. I'm highlighting this as a case of inclusion, as it's indeed a project where it's the rural communities, the marginalized communities that stand to benefit from the conservation of forests. It's not about fencing off the forest. It's about making forest conservation a livelihood opportunity for communities. So with this, I'm wrapping up my part of the presentation on how the CFC, through our projects, are supporting project developers that act for justice and peace and inclusion in the interest of poverty reduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for showcasing and presenting some of our impactful projects here in the Common Fund for Commodities. I would like to thank all speakers for their presentation, and I really hope that these points that they have raised have captured your interest and can serve as a catalyst for discussion. Now the floor is open for questions. Is there any question? Yeah, Mr. Dilip, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I'm doing that. Good afternoon or good morning or good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Ambassador Bilal, for organizing this session. And I think this session is a very important session in my view. And I like to thank Dr. Howard for this. The reason I'm saying this is, like you know, Ambassador Bilal, I've been involved with the CFC for many, many years. I think maybe more than 20 odd years, 25 years. And we have been advocating, let's say, within the governing council as well, to relook at the CFC. You know, the mandate the CFC had, how we drifted from this mandate, and the structural issues within the CFC, and so on. And why I'm saying today is a very important session, and really Howard has thrown, if I can use that expression, a stone in the pond, right? And I know this is a very sensitive discussion when he said, you know, maybe the CFC should consider its original composition and reflect on, given the present developments, if there could be another way to help these commodity dependent countries, if I may use that term. So my question in this case, to Dr. Howard would be, it's a very stimulating idea to think about BRICS CFC. And obviously, this is a very sensitive topic. So how do you think we could get about starting this dialogue, at least just thinking about this concept? Thank you.
Professor Howard?
I mean, it's an area that I know nothing about, Dilip, in the sense that this requires contact at a very high level high organizational level. But I believe that you will find fertile ground, I believe, because it's going back to that win-win situation. Here you have a group of countries that are all committed to industrialization, all of them. And no countries have ever industrialized without having an adequate supply of raw materials which are stable in price, plentiful and stable. But for that, there has to be quid pro quo, in the sense that the prices that they get have to be such that we guarantee reasonable living standards for the producers. Otherwise, they basically give up on raw material production. Better go down the entire manufacturing path. And I think that discussion, it's not a quick one, but it's important to have and to sound out a number of people. I mean, from time to time, people from the BRICS, from various bodies in the BRICS, contact me for one reason or another. And we're always talking the same language. Now, I unfortunately have no power to do anything at all. But for me, the attitude of the northern countries towards the CFC is one where it doesn't seem to hold out much of a future for the CFC, in the sense that there has to be a really substantial injection of finance, in my view, because this is such an important thing. And I believe that the countries of the BRICS will understand this. The only thing is, I just end with this, is it does involve a discussion of finance currency, the currencies being used. That's what is going to be, this is what it's going to be about in the final instance, that there will be this discussion. It'll be a discussion about, okay, if we support this, the whole world is not going to benefit, but it's only the countries that have contributed to this fund, the Stability Fund. How you negotiate that, I have nothing to say. But I don't think it's the UN CFC. I think it's something else CFC. That's what I would imagine. Otherwise, it's too confusing and complicated. But that's something you all know. However, I think the idea was always a good idea. It was always a good idea. And it is still needed today. I mean, we have seen it in that period 2021 to 23. In case people don't have a memory, in fact, even I don't have this memory, but in case you don't know, that straight after the Second World War, there was total control of prices of all raw materials for 5 years. No movement in these prices was allowed until countries could build their industrial bases again. You can check the records. And this is where this idea percolated, I mean, even though CFC was set up so much later, it was there. We call it Keynesian thinking, in economics, but it was always there because there's nothing more important than this. So I throw the ball back into your court, Philip, and yours, Ambassador Belal, that I think some tentative foraging needs to be done. And I think you will find fertile ground in that discussion, in my view.
Thank you very much, Professor Nicholas, for your contribution. Mindful of the time, do we have any other questions? Your Excellency, Ambassador Fortuna Cesare.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having the floor. I would like to commend the Managing Director, Ambassador Sheikh Mohammed Bilal, for convening this important webinar with the team ending social and institutional maltreatment, acting together for just, peaceful, and inclusive societies. I would like also to take this opportunity to gratitude all the three presenters, as rightly presented here. Currently, commodity producing developing countries that are dependent on a limited number of commodities are affected by the challenge more than others. Their sole dependence on few commodities, mainly produced by smallholder farmers, increasing their vulnerability to external shock, price volatility, and market fluctuation. While we are appreciating the focus of the organization in supporting the critical trade sectors of developing countries and bringing the concept of humanizing value chain using innovation, accelerating economic growth, sustainable development, ensure sustainable financing, and addressing the challenge surrounding on commodity are extremely critical to overcome poverty and food security. As we all know, the European Union Deforestation Regulation, which presents numerous challenges to developing countries' export trade access, such as may erode preferential margin under EBA and could increase the risk of poverty. The regulation requires exporting countries and therefore to set up and maintain costly compliance system, which will drive up their production and trade costs and reduce their competitiveness in EU market. In this regard, I have a question to CFC. That is, what role can the CFC play to avoid unintended impact on coffee and other commodities? And farmers and farming households in developing countries in exploring strategies to mitigate possible negative impact of EUDR. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your kind words and also for your question. Just a very short note on that. The CFC is currently and actively supporting a large number of projects that are trying to adjust in the European regulations. We have been supporting coffee cooperatives, cocoa cooperatives, soy cooperatives and companies to do it as possible, and we will continue doing that. Thank you very much. If we don't have any other questions for today, I would like to invite you, and before we close today's webinar, to invite you to the next webinar we have, the next event, over one of our recent innovation financing structures, the Development Impact Bond. We will share with you the invitation shortly afterwards. This could be one of the solutions for the future in development. And now I would like to invite Ambassador Belal for his closing remarks. Ambassador Belal, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I wish we have enough time. I just, for the sake of time, Excellency, from Ethiopia, I think we'll get back to you in one-to-one level to discuss these things in greater details. Just to rest assured that we are actively engaged, not only ourselves, we are also working with the United Nations Conference for Trade and Development, UNCTAD, for a project to kind of doing some research on what could be the impact of this UDR on smallholders and SMEs. And we are also working with the member states. We are also asking everyone engaged in this coffee value chain to take their time and try to bring awareness to our smallholders so that they can save themselves from any kind of unintended impact of this initiative. It is, in principle, it is not something that we oppose, but the implementations and also bringing enough awareness to the farmers is something that we need to work on. That's a long discussion, but please, Excellencies, I just could not thank you enough for being there for us. We had, I think, a good number of Excellencies, our dear colleagues from one part of the world, much more than what we expected. But now, as to, I think, summarize it in a one sentence, that we have only one world to live, north or south. So, and also to answer to some of the remarks that our keynote speaker, Professor Howard made, I would like to also adjust that global north is very much with us. They are here. And we are, the fact that we are in the Netherlands is a living proof of that. But how much of them they are with in person or with their heart and soul, that's something that we need to discuss. And with I think the today's discussions, I think now at least whoever here, then you can have an idea that going forward, we need to work together, because this is the only mother planet that we have. And if we want to make poverty a history which is hidden into the smallholders and wrapped around the commodities, there is no other way, as Professor Howard said, that we cannot address the root cause of poverty without going into the commodity value chains. And I know the manufacturing and others in discussions and the discussion on the BRICS as well. We just want to highlight it again. This organization was brought into existence after almost 25 years of negotiation and discussion and debate. We would like it to remain for all, not only for only one particular group or region, but we would remain open for all kind of collaboration and existence, as my colleague Peter Ninsel showed you from 3 different countries, that how we are trying to address the poverty in bits and pieces. Somewhere it's only poverty, somewhere it's only for the peace, somewhere it is for the inclusiveness, and more so also for the carbon credits. Because the more that we can help countries to address, to add value to their commodities, we will also make the carbon footprint much less than what it is. All again, I thank you all, mostly to Professor Nicholas. Your insights really have been invaluable, and we are immensely grateful for time and expertise that you have shared with us entirely on pro bono basis. So grateful to you. And finally, to bid fair to all of you now, I would like to request you, please hold on to the message of fostering a humanized value chain through conscious consumer choices. It does not take much. It simply calls for a commitment to moral consistency, to do the best we can, as long as we share this single planet, since we have no second earth, one for the wealthy and one for the poor in the global south. It is on us to make this one livable for all. Thank you, and let's move forward together with this purpose in mind for our moral consistency, and thereby making this globalized world livable for all with means of living and dignity. Before I conclude, I thank my colleagues, Chris, Peter, Ute, Michelle, Walker, everyone, and all my colleagues for their support. I thank you all. Excellencies, this will be, the video will be on our website. Please try to visit us and in the social media as well. If you liked it, please made it known in our social media. If there's you don't like it, write it back to us. We are always there for you. And Professor Howard, eternally grateful to you, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.